What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Monday, June 2nd edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 6-game MLB slate today coming back from the weekend. Doesn't look like we have any weather concerns. Huge $5, 47,000 entry, 50K to first tournament on DraftKings. Obviously, some other good contests as well. Going to go through game by game, talking about everything DFS, team by team, player by player, all that stuff. Taking a look at how my early lineups would look if the slate started right now. Obviously, that's going to change a lot between now and lock. Ownership's going to change. Lineups are going to come out, all of that stuff. But I'm going to just walk through how I see the slate right now, talk about anything I see that is interesting. Looks like we have some pretty high team totals in some spots, some good parks for hitting on this slate with Cincinnati, with Boston, with Sacramento, and with the Dodgers. So should probably be some good offensive games, even though we only have 6 of them. As a reminder, going to use the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. These are available for you as well. Link is in the description below. Use the promo code that you see at the bottom of the screen. UTA MLB gets you 10% off. If I keep winning stuff, we're going to have to change the promo code to my name. But for now, we're keeping it at UTA. UTA MLB, 10% off of either of our projections package. Is you can get the full projections package. You get access to everything you see on the screen, fully detailed, downloadable projections, do whatever you want with them. But also, if you're somebody that does play less volume, lower stakes, whatever, obviously DFS has become something that is pretty expensive to invest in. And if you are a lower volume player, it can become really difficult to get access to quality data and still be in a position where you have any chance of making money once you've paid for it all. So we do also have the $10 a month overlay projections package, which just takes our projections, puts them right onto your DraftKings lineups page. So if you are hand building a few lineups, you have the projections right there in front of you. Can't download them, can't do all the other stuff with them. But if you are somebody that plays lower volume, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. So going to use those. Thanks for everybody in chat. Congratulated me on the win on Friday. It was nice to finally get first in a real sized $15 tournament. It seemed like every day that I had done well in them for a while was when it was like 20K to first or 25K to first. So not that I'm complaining about those wins, but nice to get the 50K on Friday. Definitely feels good. And it's been a good start to the MLB season so far. So hopefully can continue going with that. Starting with Cincinnati, taking on Milwaukee here in Cincinnati. Good park for offense. Aaron Savali going for the Brewers. Brady Singer on the mound for the Cincinnati Reds. Savali getting about 12% ownership here. Singer getting about 12% ownership. I am pretty much around the field on Savali at 6K. I'm a little bit under the field on Singer, only getting to about 5% of him, except for I think I clicked something wrong. So let me see if I can figure that out. Yeah, I had the wrong lineups on the page. So going to adjust that. Same thing holds, getting to about 3% Singer, getting to about 12% Savali. Singer is more expensive at $7,500. It is also a relatively difficult strikeout matchup for him going against Milwaukee. Obviously, the park doesn't do him any favors either. The Brewers' active roster against right-handed pitching ranks 21st, tied for 20th in strikeout percentage so far this season. They've been about league average with a 101 WRC+. That ranks 23rd. So not the best offense overall, but not an easy spot for Singer to get strikeouts. Overall, this season, Singer has struck out 19.6% of hitters. That is down about 3 points from last year. Stuff plus grade is at 95, which is actually up from last year, but still below average. Same for the pitching plus grade at 93. So nothing that really stands out for Singer as being particularly good. Strikeouts haven't been there so far with only a 19.5% strikeout percentage. It's a 6-game slate. Obviously, it's fine if you want to play some Singer, but I'm not getting him as much as I'm getting to Savali. And Savali, I think it's probably just because of the price difference on him. He's only thrown 12 innings so far this year, so nothing really to read into there. He is generally just kind of an average pitcher. If you go back to the start of last season, 25.5% K percentage against lefties, only 17.5% against righties, 156 expected ISO to righties, 167 to lefties, 307 expected WOBA to lefties, 317 to righties. Just pretty average in terms of basically everything. Does have a little bit more strikeout upside over that period against lefties, as I mentioned. For the Reds projected lineup, you have a pretty balanced lineup, probably 5 lefties, 4 righties in it. Not the best lineup, obviously. De La Cruz, really good. Friedel's solid. Stevenson has some power upside at catcher. Benson's okay, but it's a middle of the road Cincinnati lineup, I think. Overall, against right-handed pitching this season, Cincinnati ranks 21st in WRC plus. They rank 7th in strikeout percentage. So there are some strikeouts to be had there. But I think the thing really just kind of driving some ownership and some exposure to Savali is that he's only $6,000. So 6-game slate, limited pitching options in terms of the total number. So getting some of him, I think, is fine. Offensively, this is obviously a good park for offense. As I mentioned, you do have several other good parks for offense on this slate as well. So sometimes on a 6-game slate, if you get a game in Great American, it's going to really stand out as a great spot to get to just because of the park. If, for example, you had a slate where you have San Francisco, you have Seattle, you have, these other really pitcher-friendly parks on it. That's not the case tonight, but it does still look like a pretty good spot to get to offenses. I am getting to Milwaukee. In particular, William Contreras showing up quite a bit for me. 12% projected ownership for him. 30% of my lineups right now. $4,700 price tag. He's just always going to be one of the higher upside catchers on a slate, but even more so when you have a shorter slate. Only a 148 expected ISO allowed to righties by Singer so far this year. So even though the strikeouts haven't been there, he hasn't given up a lot of power. 122 dating back to last season, whereas he has allowed a 203 expected ISO to lefties over that time. So in a perfect world, you would have somebody that could hit like William Contreras, but from the left side of the plate. Obviously, he is right-handed, but still a high upside catcher here. Bryce Turang showing up about 20% of the time for me as well. Fields at 13%. Gives you some stolen base upside, does have some pop from the left side. You can see here, not a high home run projection, but not nothing either. Does have a relatively high stolen base projection, as you can see. So he looks pretty good. Christian Yelich is day-to-day. If he's in the lineup, he's projected for about 15% ownership. Only $4,400. Good park for power. He's in about 13% of my lineups. I'm getting around 10 or 11% of Hoskins, Churio, Durbin as a value play, and then getting around 5% of Collins, Ortiz, Sal Frelick. So overall, getting a little bit north of the field on Milwaukee, but in particular, it's William Contreras and Bryce Turang showing up as the guys that I'm most overweight on there from the Brewers. For Cincinnati, pretty much in line with the field on most of them against Savali. Tyler Stevenson, 10% projected ownership at 4K. Another catcher that just has power upside, which can be relatively difficult to find. Ellie De La Cruz goes without saying. If you can get him into lineups, great. Tons of stolen base upside, tons of power upside. He'll be hitting from his preferred side of the plate against Savali as well. You can see a relatively high home run projection on both De La Cruz and Benson here. High stolen base projection on De La Cruz as well. Will Benson showing up 10% of the time for me at just 3,900. He's projected for 5% ownership. You have like 5 to 10% projected ownership coming into Benson, McLean, Espinal, Steer, Friedel. So Stevenson, De La Cruz, Benson, the guys I'm getting to the most here at like 10 to 15%. And then I'm getting, around 5% or less the rest of the Cincinnati lineup so far. We don't have, like I said, any sort of sample on Savali yet this season. He's only thrown 12 innings. Going back to last year, 167 expected ISO to lefties, 156 to righties. Again, just kind of an average guy in terms of limiting production. So I don't mind getting to the Reds in this park, but I think mostly you're just looking at the guys that the guys that I would gravitate to first are just the ones that have the most power / stolen base upside. I don't think you're looking at a situation where you have really drastic splits or anything like that from Savali. Angels are taking on the Red Sox in Boston. Dick Fitz going for the Red Sox at 6,600. Tyler Anderson for the Angels. Double checking right now because I have seen conflicting reports on who's going for Boston. But it does look like Fitz is probable. He went 3 innings last time out. He threw 44 pitches, so probably not going super deep into this game, but I would guess he can throw something in the 50 to 60 pitch range. Hunter Dobbins, I had seen as a potential option as well. He went 3 innings on the 28th, so I don't know if they'll go to him or not, but he is in the bullpen. So maybe you get a situation where he piggybacks with Fitz, but Fitz is expected to get the ball first, and he's getting sub 5% ownership. He's in like 12% of my lineups right now. I think just because of the $6,600 price tag and then also the good strikeout matchup against the Angels. If this were a larger slate, I wouldn't have interest in him just because he's probably not going super deep into this game. But you do have an Angels lineup that strikes out. You do have Mike Trout back. So obviously that alone makes this lineup a lot more dangerous than it is when he is out. But there are still strikeouts to be had. And Fitz is just pretty inexpensive on a slate where you don't have great pitching overall. You have a couple options that I think look really good at the top. But if you look at strikeout percentages for the pitchers on this slate, overall, you have a 30% strikeout percentage for Flaherty. You have 28% for Ryan. It drops down to 25% on May, 22% on Webb, and then you're down below 22%. So it does look like a slate where saving some money at pitching is a perfectly reasonable strategy. I think it's relatively unlikely that you're going to have a slate where 2 pitchers really go nuts. And then it's even less likely that you're going to have 2 pitchers that aren't the 2 most expensive, most obvious ones on the slate in Ryan and Flaherty, because you just don't have a ton of strikeout upside from the other options. So I don't mind kind of just sacrificing SP2. And that's why I'm getting some Tyler Anderson here as well. Certainly not a pitcher that I have any confidence in or that I love getting to. But he is getting about 8% ownership at 7,200. He's in 15% of my lineups right now. So about 2x the field, not any sort of huge stand or anything like that. Only a 17.7% K percentage so far this year, slightly below average stuff in terms of stuff plus, well below average in terms of pitching plus, only coming in at 88.7 there. That's 5 points lower than it was last year. I've mentioned the outcome metric that I have that just kind of gives me an idea of how good pitchers are at getting their desired outcomes, weighting strikeouts a little bit heavier, but looking for strikeouts, infield pop-ups, and groundouts. Tyler Anderson so far this season has been 3/4 of a standard deviation worse than average at that. So there's no real redeeming qualities here about Anderson, other than you probably will have some ownership coming into the Red Sox, and you can negatively correlate against that. And then you have low ownership coming into Anderson himself, and on a 6-game slate with relatively low opportunity cost at pitcher, I don't mind just kind of throwing some darts at Anderson. Stephen Leibowitz said in chat, Anderson reverse splits. Yeah, generally, that's been the case throughout most of his career. Very good changeup that he doesn't throw to lefties, and that he throws 40 to 50% of the time to righties. So far this season, not great against righties, 186 expected ISO, 307 expected WOBA, but certainly better than against lefties, where he has a 258 expected ISO and a 367 expected WOBA. If you take it back to last season, basically identical strikeout percentages against both sides at around 18.5%, but a 311 expected WOBA, 164 expected ISO to righties, 360 expected WOBA, 223 expected ISO to lefties. So he is reverse splits, and he is somebody that you have a very clear and obvious reason for it, just because his most effective pitch is one that he only throws to one side of the plate. And it does, just play better against opposite-handed hitters. When you look at the Red Sox lineup, you're probably going to get a right-handed heavy lineup. This is a team that generally platoons relatively heavily. I don't know if they will be sharp enough to just not do it against Tyler Anderson. It seems like most teams somehow, even still in 2025, struggle with not just blindly loading up on righties against every single lefty. So we'll see what the Red Sox do there. But the more righties in the lineup for Boston, it doesn't make it safe for Anderson, but it is better for Anderson, the more righties that are in there. And then the counterpoint to that, or the corollary to that, is if you are stacking the Red Sox, it goes without saying in general, but do not shy away from Jarren Duran and Rafael Devers just because Tyler Anderson is left-handed. So definitely keep an eye on that Red Sox lineup, because also if they do go with that platoon lineup where you have Ref Snyder in there, maybe you have Abraham Toro in there, it does elevate the pinch hit risk as well. Whereas if they just throw out a lineup where Willie Abreu is starting against Tyler Anderson, for example, then you don't have nearly as much pinch hit risk in general for those platoon bats, and it will make it a little bit easier just to stack the Red Sox with confidence, at least in terms of who's getting at bats later on in the game. So I am overweight on both of these pitchers right now. Certainly not saying that with any level of confidence. It's mostly just a slate specific thing and, sub 10% ownership coming into both of them right now. If that were to change, then if the ownership comes up, I'll probably just get a little bit less. Steven said Toro's a switch hitter anyway. Yeah, but you still potentially have a better left-handed bat available off the bench, whereas they're throwing him out there to hit from the right side. But with Casas being out, it's not as much of an issue anyway. If Casas were in, you would definitely be getting Casas pinch hitting for him once Already came in. Looking at the offenses here, starting on the Angel side, I'm not getting too much of them. Neither is the field. It's one of those tricky spots where, from a macro standpoint, it's an appealing spot to get to the Angels. They have a 4.5 to 5 team total in Fenway Park. We know this park plays up power. We know that the Angels have power in their lineup, and you do have Mike Trout back at 4,900 as well. So, Neto is somebody that comes with stolen base and some power upside. Moncada's got some power. Ward has power. Soler, Trout, Ohapi, Adele. This is not a good offense overall, but it's not one that lacks upside. There is actual power upside here anyway. And the matchup against Dick Fitz really isn't a bad one. The problem, though, is that it gets tricky where there's a pretty good chance that Fitz is going to go through the lineup 1.5, maybe 2 times, and then you're going to get to Hunter Dobbins. So it's kind of it's not a true bullpen game, but it's, kind of like a quasi bullpen game where you're just going to probably have different looks for most of your plate appearances, which is not super appealing. So 5 to 10% ownership coming in pretty much across the board to the Angels. Right now, I'm around 5% on pretty much all their relevant guys. I wouldn't mind getting a little bit more just because, again, they are in Fenway. They do have power, but I do also kind of understand why I'm not getting a ton. There are plenty of good offensive spots on this slate, including the other side. For Boston, I mentioned I'm getting a bit over the field on Anderson. I am also around the field, if not slightly higher, on these Red Sox bats as well. Trevor Story has not been good this year, but as a result, he is $3,300. He's probably hitting somewhere in the middle of the order. Getting 12% ownership, I'm getting to 17%. Jarren Duran getting 15%, I'm at 16%. Like I said before, don't be afraid to go to these left-handed bats against Tyler Anderson. He is not good against left-handed hitters. Rafael Devers showing up 15% for me. So is Ref Snyder. Myers in that range. Campbell's in that range. Getting about 7% Toro, 6% Rafaela. So I am getting to the Red Sox pretty much in line with the field throughout. I like Devers a lot. I like Duran a lot. Do not hesitate at all whatsoever to click either of those guys against the left-handed starter. And if Willie Abreu is in the lineup, you can certainly click him as well. Tigers taking on the White Sox in Detroit. This is one where I have a massive pitching stand that probably at least, diminishes somewhat by lock as lineups come out, ownership gets, kind of more solidified, etc. But right now, $6,800 Jonathan Cannon, projected for 8% ownership. I'm getting 36%. I do not feel good about that whatsoever. I do think Jonathan Cannon is probably a better pitcher than the average person would give him credit for, maybe. I don't think he's good. He has a 16.5% strikeout percentage, 98.5 stuff plus grade is up a little bit from last year, 99.1 pitching plus grade up slightly. Generally somebody that relies on getting ground balls. He has still been nearly half of a standard deviation worse than league average in my outcomes metric, though. Part of that is because he's a well below average strikeout pitcher. I think what's mostly driving me getting to Cannon right now is a combination of he's cheap, and I really like saving money at SP2. He's facing a Detroit team that I assume is going to have ownership, given that they have the highest or one of the highest team totals on the slate. And he's not getting ownership on his own right now, only projected between 5 and 10%. All of that said, none of that makes it likely he's going to actually have a good game. It just means that when he does have a good game, I can be in an advantageous position relative to the field. So certainly would not be upset if that ownership, or my exposure to him rather, does come down a little bit as once we get closer to lock. But at the same time, I understand why it's happening. It's the same reason I'm getting to Anderson. It's the same reason I'm getting to Fitz. It's the same reason I'm getting some Savali. It has nothing to do with confidence in him. It really just has to do with roster construction overall. On the other side, Flaherty is projected for 40% ownership at 9K. I am a little below the field there, getting about half at 19 to 20%. goes without saying that the more Jack Flaherty I can get, the better I'm going to feel about it. He is clearly one of the best pitching options on the slate, if not the best. The 9K price tag is not a problem either. We have a reasonable 15 to 16 fantasy point projection on him. He is a good strikeout pitcher so far this season, striking out 29.9% of the hitters that he has faced, has a good matchup against the White Sox. So, all of that working in his favor, obviously. Most recent start was the 27th against the Giants, went 6 innings there. He had gone 6 2/3 to start before that. So you don't really have significant workload concerns. We have him, as you can see on the screen, projected to face just shy of 23 batters, projected for just north of or between 5 and 6 innings pitched, which I think is pretty reasonable. Obviously, it is an above average matchup against the White Sox, 9th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching so far this season. They are also very close to the bottom at 29th in WRC plus. They are the worst major league team against right-handed pitching. The Rockies are their own separate category, coming in with a 74 WRC plus. They just don't belong in the major leagues. But Jack Flaherty is just kind of one of those. If this were a bigger slate, I'd probably be around the field on Flaherty just because it would be really easy for me to differentiate my lineups elsewhere, get good bats that are relatively low owned. That does become more difficult on a 6-game slate. But clearly, if you can build a lineup that you like and you have Jack Flaherty, he is one of the best pitching options on the slate. Josh Gillum said, is Moncada back? I don't know. We'll find out when that lineup comes out. He's in the projected lineup that I have right now. He played yesterday and the day before. I don't know where Moncada went. So I'm not sure what you're referring to. But yeah, I assume Moncada's in. And yeah, Trout has been hitting 6th. I don't know why. I haven't seen the reasoning for what they're doing with him. I joked about it on Twitter the other day that Yohan Moncada came back from basically being hurt for a year and a half. And the Angels were just like, yeah, you're our 3 hitter immediately. Doesn't matter. We don't need to see anything. And then Mike Trout comes back and it's like, oh man, we should, hold off. We don't really know if this guy can be any good. So yeah, I don't know what they're doing with Trout. If they're intentionally trying to limit plate appearances or something, in which case, why not bat him 9th? I don't know what the deal is there. I can't imagine that it's actually that Ron Washington thinks he should be batting 6th. I don't know. And yeah, Justin Sports said, I think he means Moncada back is in. He's good again. Yeah, Moncada's actually been hitting the ball reasonably well so far this season against right-handed pitching for Moncada. 299 expected ISO, 383 expected WOBA. That's only in 93 plate appearances. But yeah, Moncada has actually been doing well. Obviously going way back, a top prospect back when he was traded from the Red Sox to the White Sox for Chris Sale. He kind of started to look good early in his career and then just went the way of everybody that ever plays for the White Sox and completely flamed out and then had injuries. But so far he's been good in a very limited sample with the Angels so far. Looking at the bats here, I am getting to the Tigers a lot. So this is one other thing that from just a portfolio standpoint makes me feel at least a little bit better about having that stand on Jonathan Cannon. When you look at the pricing on the Tigers and you look at the pricing on Jonathan Cannon, I do think it's pretty likely that one side of this game is at the very least useful for tournaments, if not a tournament winner. You have a $6,800 Cannon. It's not very difficult on this slate for him to be a useful SP2 option given the alternatives. But then you look at the pricing for the Tigers where you have a 3K Colt Keith with multi-position eligibility. Kerry Carpenter is 4,200. Riley Green, 4,800. Torres, 4,500. Torkelson, 4,400 in what's been a good year for him so far. Sub 3K Trey Sweeney, Dingler, 3,800. Relatively cheap catcher. Javi Baez has been good this year at 4K with MPE. McKinstry's solid at 3,900. We don't know exactly what lineup will be out there, but Wenceel Perez is only $3,100. So my point here is that when you get a shorter slate like this, and I talk about this a lot on shows, but when you get a shorter slate like this, obviously the chances of any offense being the winner is just going to be higher. The average, without accounting for matchup or anything or offense's talent or anything like that, you would expect each offense to have about an 8.3% chance of being the highest, the winning offense. But then you factor in the salaries to Detroit and the fact that they have one of the highest team totals on the slate, then obviously they're going to have a higher than 8.3% chance of being the winner. But even if you move away from being the best stack, then you're also just thinking about 2 or 3 players maybe coming from an offense. And with the pricing as cheap as it is on the Tigers, it's pretty likely that you get good games, good point per dollar games from at least part of this offense. And if you don't, it's really likely that $6,200 or $6,800 Cannon gave you a really good game. Like, it's just hard to think about what that middle ground looks like, where Jonathan Cannon isn't a good play at 6,800, but also this Tigers team that is sub 5K across the board and sub 4K in a lot of cases also isn't useful. It's just really hard to like envision what that really looks like. So that being said, I do, from a max entry standpoint, a portfolio standpoint, think that it makes sense that I'm well over the field on the Tigers, and I'm also over the field on Cannon. I don't have any issues with that. Obviously, if you're playing single entry, 3 max, I think you can kind of just choose either side. Or if you're playing like 3 max, you can play, one of each, 2 of one of one. My point here is I think that just getting to both sides of this looks pretty good. Colt Keith, if he's in the lineup, projected for 14% ownership, I'm getting to 33% at this really cheap price tag. This is somebody that does have the ability to hit. He's really cheap. He has multi-position eligibility. This slate also isn't the deepest at first base. I think that's noteworthy when you talk about Keith, because he has first base and second base eligibility. And a lot of times that's not super helpful. It kind of just still means he's a second baseman because you're not going to want to play him at first. But like on this slate, when you look at the first baseman, you have Ohtani, but you can also play him in the outfield. You have Torkelson, you have Alonso, you have Hoskins, like you have Soderstrom, you have Freeman, who's expensive. They're still good first base options, but it's just not as deep as most slates are going to be at first base. So relatively, that just makes Keith even a little bit easier to get to. So far this season, limited plate appearances for him so far, but he does have a 206 expected ISO in 144 plate appearances. If you go back to last season, 610 plate appearances, 154 expected ISO. But he is somebody that does project to have, some solid upside, especially at only 3K. Kerry Carpenter, I love at 4,200. Just a lot of power. This park is not great for hitting home runs, but it is, I believe, better than Comerica. I am double checking that now just to make sure I'm not completely lying. But over the last 3 seasons for left-handed hitters, we have, in terms of home run park factor, actually, it's pretty close. White Sox are 24th. Comerica is 22nd. 91 for Comerica, 87 for guaranteed rate field. So I do take that back. It's pretty neutral. But either way, Kerry Carpenter has a 272 expected ISO, 202 actual ISO against right-handed pitching this year. Cannon's not somebody that misses a lot of bats. When he's on, he's getting the ball on the ground, but that's not something I mind. 152 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Cannon. So he has done a pretty good job of limiting power overall, but only a 20% strikeout percentage there. Righties have a 209 expected ISO against him with just a 15% strikeout percentage. So like the salary on Carpenter. I like the upside for Riley Green, who is a little bit more expensive than Carpenter, but still only $4,800. We have high home run projections on both Carpenter and Green, as you can see on the screen. Green so far this season against right-handed pitching has a 291 actual ISO, 311 expected ISO, 391 expected WOBA. He's been fantastic. Also jump-started my very good May by hitting 2 home runs in the 9th inning to get me a second place. So I am a little bit biased toward him. Spencer Torkelson, 11% projected ownership. I'm getting to 17%. I mentioned it a second ago, but Cannon has been reverse splits in terms of his strikeout percentage and his expected ISO allowed so far this year. Torkelson has a 250 expected ISO, 352 expected WOBA against righties. He has put it all together. Obviously a highly regarded hitting prospect, struggled when he first came up to the majors, as a lot of people do. He has put it together. I think he looks really good. And then I'm getting some value with Sweeney, Dingler, Perez if he's in the lineup, getting about 7% Torres at 4,500 at second base. So I really like the Tigers here. I like the pricing. I like getting to them. I'm getting to a good amount of Cannon as well. If I had to just tell you right now, choose, like, do I play the Tigers or do I play Cannon? Obviously, I would prefer to play the Tigers. I have more confidence in them, but I do, from a salary standpoint, understand why I am getting to both sides there. On the White Sox side, I am getting to them a bit as well, mostly driven by a couple of bats, though. Miguel Vargas, only 3,300, first base and third base eligible. As I was just saying with Colt Keith, that first base eligibility is just a little bit more valuable on this slate than it is on most. So you are getting negative correlation with the White Sox. They are clearly one of the lower probability teams on the slate, but you are getting negative correlation with them. They are low owned. Vargas's 6% projected ownership is the highest on the entire team. So you get value, you get negative correlation, you get low ownership. And while Jack Flaherty is a very good pitcher and a very good strikeout pitcher, he does give up power. Lefties have a 231 expected ISO against him this year. Righties have a 187 expected ISO against him. So he is somebody that, will make some mistakes and can give up hard contact. This park for right-handed hitters over the last 3 seasons is better than for lefties. 100 home run park factor in this park. So again, that is another point in favor of Spencer Torkelson as well. If you're just, looking for individual Tigers bats, but also for Miguel Vargas. Not that he has tons of power, but he will be hitting from the right side. But then I'm getting to like 5 to 10% of Sosa, Benintendi, Robert, Caro at catcher, Madroth, Talkman, who homered yesterday. So mostly treating the White Sox as kind of a secondary stack where I'm getting to them a little bit for value. Right now, I'm a little bit north of the field, but nothing too crazy. The guy that I am getting the most of and that is standing out the most, though, is Miguel Vargas because of that price tag and because of the multi-position eligibility, just making it really easy to fit him into different lineup types. And so far, 173 plate appearances against right-handed pitching this year, 205 expected ISO, 348 expected WOBA. So that has looked good. One other thing that does stand out in looking at these expected numbers for the White Sox, 256 expected ISO through 112 plate appearances for Benintendi. I assume that stops at some point, but seems like Benintendi has finally, like a decade too late, figured out how to hit for power. So that's something interesting as well, given that he is only $3,100. Padres are taking on the Giants in San Francisco. The only real pitcher-friendly park on this slate, guaranteed rate, again, kind of more middle of the pack, maybe slightly pitcher-friendly, which is something that I didn't even realize until recently. I looked a couple weeks ago and noticed it. But if you look at overall park factor over the last 3 seasons, White Sox are 19th at 98. Giants are 26th out of 28 teams. There are 28 current stadiums at 96. So easily the most pitcher-friendly park here in San Francisco. Tough strikeout matchup, though, for Giants, for Logan Webb. This Padres team is extremely difficult to strike out and obviously good overall. 9th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching, 28th in strikeout percentage. And it's the type of lineup that you really hate taking pitchers against in general, because it's not just that their average strikeout percentage is low because Luis Arraez never strikes out and he drags it down. It's that every hitter at the top of the order is tough to strike out. Fernando Tatis is a difficult strikeout matchup. Manny Machado is a difficult strikeout matchup. Merrill's difficult to strike out. Arraez is close to impossible. Bogarts is tough. Cronenworth is tough. Gavin Sheets may or may not be in the lineup, but he's one of the higher strikeout rates. And I think off the top of my head, he's 23% or so against right-handed pitching going back to the start of last year. So it's just tough strikeout after tough strikeout after tough strikeout. That being said, Webb is certainly one of the more talented pitchers on this slate. I'm not getting him much at all right now. Maybe I have more by the time we get to lock, but he's projected for 33% ownership. The problem I have with him is he's $9,700 and getting that much ownership. You can see here that we have him projected pretty similarly to Flaherty, a little bit lower, given that obviously the matchup is a lot tougher, and Webb is nowhere near as good a strikeout pitcher either. He is somebody that, you hope can work deep into games, and that's generally where he's going to get his fantasy points from. This year, he has been much better at getting strikeouts. I do think that's noteworthy. He has a 28% strikeout percentage this year compared to 20.5% last season. Stuff plus grade is actually down a little bit. Pitching plus grade is down a little bit. So I don't know if we see that continue or not, but he has seemingly made adjustments overall. He is getting more strikeouts. If we look at the matchups that he's had some good matchups, but also some tougher ones, which is what you would expect once you get to this point of the season. But when you look at the strikeouts, 5 strikeouts in 4 innings against Kansas City, which is a tough strikeout matchup. 6 in 5 against San Diego earlier in the year. His overall strikeout percentage probably is boosted a little bit by some of the favorable matchups. He had 10 strikeouts in 6 innings against Detroit in his last start. He had 9 in 7 against Minnesota, but he had 12 against the Angels. He had 10 in a start against Cincinnati. So overall, I do think Webb probably is a better strikeout pitcher so far this season than he has been previously in his career. He's throwing his he's throwing his sweeper 29% of the time to right-handed hitters so far this season. It was 28% last year, 13% swinging strike percentage on it last year, 15% so far this year. So nothing really notable there. 16% changeup usage to righties this year, was 24% last year. There's nothing that really stands out as far as like change in pitch mix that I'm noticing. So I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And this is obviously a really tough strikeout spot against the Padres. So anyway, like from a talent standpoint, Webb's certainly one of the best pitchers on the slate, and it is a very good park for pitching. It's not like it would be surprising if Logan Webb has a good game, but I think it's really just that if a third of the field is going to roster him at 9,700, not only does a third of the field have the $9,700 pitcher against the Padres, but you do, because of the slate size, start to run into that issue where your Logan Webb lineups are going to look very similar to other Logan Webb lineups as well. And you have to keep in mind that we're talking about a $5 47,000 entry tournament on DraftKings. That's somewhere around 15,000 lineups that have Logan Webb and then are starting to be funneled into similar builds where either you have to pay down for one of those SP2s, or if you're going like Webb plus Flaherty, you at that point have, $3,900 left for 8 hitter positions. Or if you go Webb plus Ryan, you have $3,800 left for 8 hitter positions. It really starts to limit you in like what other stacks you can get to. And you're going to, I think, see a lot of overlap. So that's another, I think, concern that I would have about getting to Webb. Out of the 3 top pitchers on this slate, I think Webb is my third, Webb is the one that I like the third most. Like I would rather get to Flaherty against the White Sox. I would rather get, especially for $700 less, I would rather get to Joe Ryan, more strikeout upside than Webb against the Padres. So if you're going to have similar ownership projections to those 3 pitchers, and right now it's 38% projected to Ryan, 40% projected to Flaherty, 33% projected to Webb. Webb's going to be the one that falls off first for me. And like I said, I'm below the field right now on Flaherty as well. Spoiler alert, I'm over on Ryan. Ideally, I think I would like to be over on Flaherty and under on Ryan, but we do have Ryan projected quite a bit better right now. But like it makes all the sense in the world to me that Webb would be the one that falls off first. Now, what you could see happen is we get closer to lock and you're looking at like 40 to 50% ownership to Ryan, 40 to 50% on Flaherty, 20% on Webb. And then, Webb starts to become a little bit more interesting. But if you're going to get very similar ownership on the 3, I'll take the one not facing the Padres. For the Padres rather, we have Stephen Kolek on the mound, 6% projected ownership, $8,200 price tag. I'm not really getting to him. If he was in that 6 to 7K bucket, I would have no issue taking some shots at him, just like I'm taking shots at plenty of bad pitchers. But 8,200 just is tough. I would rather at SP2 save the salary. Like I'd rather either be getting the May 2 of, Flaherty, May, Webb, Ryan builds, or just going down to like that 6 to 7K range, rolling the dice on any of those guys. It's pretty tough, I think, to kind of land on Stephen Kolek at 8,200. Even though the park is good, the matchup against the Giants is fine. They are 10th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They are 25th in WRC plus, but it just becomes tough, I think, to really want to pay that salary, especially when, not that Dustin May has a good matchup, but like Dustin May is $200 less just from a talent standpoint. You have Severino, who's $1,200 less. You have the other cheap pitching that we've already talked about. So I think it's tough to get to Kolek, and it looks like the field most likely agrees there. I'm not getting to the Padres against Webb. This is kind of, to me, the inverse of what I was talking about with the Tigers and Jonathan Cannon from a pricing standpoint. $9,700 Logan Webb can do a good job of limiting runs, not giving up home runs, having a good start, and not be a super useful pitcher. For that to happen, you basically just need him to go 6 innings, strike out 5-6 guys, but lose to some combination of Ryan, Flaherty, any other pitchers, but those 2 obviously being the most likely. And then on the other side, pretty expensive Padres team where you have $4,900 for Machado, $5,400 for Tatis, $5,100 for Merrill. Arise is only $4K, but doesn't have a lot of power, and he's not at a park where he's likely to hit home runs. Bogarts is $3,800, but not super excited to get there against Webb. It's just really easy to see how everything from this game, this matchup, Webb versus Padres, it's just kind of, whatever when you consider salary. So I'm not getting to the Padres. I'm not really getting to Webb. I'm fine with that. For Giants bats here against Kolek, about a 4.5 implied run total. Not getting to a ton of them either. Matt Chapman is the guy I'm getting to the most. He's who the field is getting to the most. About 10% projected ownership. I'm getting around 10% of him at 4,200. Adames getting 5% ownership. I'm getting to 5%. Other than that, I'm sub 5% on all these guys, and the field is around 5%. So overall, I'm just not going to bats in this game, which I think makes sense given that it is very clearly the park where you are the least likely to get home runs on this slate. Minnesota taking on the A's in Sacramento. I mentioned it a second ago, but I'm getting a lot of Joe Ryan now. And with the way we have him projected, it makes sense. If you give me a projection on Joe Ryan that is, several points higher than anybody else on the slate, and, yeah, he's the most expensive as well, but you tell me that he's going to have similar ownership to Flaherty and to Webb in that price range, then yeah, I'm going to just want more Ryan. I am a little scared by the gap in projection between Ryan and Flaherty. Like, Ryan is facing the A's in Sacramento. That is a dangerous spot, albeit a spot that does have some strikeout upside. Flaherty is facing the White Sox in Chicago. I have more confidence in Flaherty having a good game, but you do have a massive strikeout ceiling for Joe Ryan based on what we've seen so far this year. 30.5% strikeout percentage, 104.5 stuff plus grade, 106.1 pitching plus grade. Those are the best on the slate outside, or best pitching plus grade rather, outside of Logan Webb. Second best stuff plus grade behind Webb and Luis Severino, which is surprising. We'll talk about that one on the other side. But yeah, I'm getting a lot of Joe Ryan right now. If I were to lose some Ryan, get to some more Flaherty, I would have no issue with that whatsoever. If that doesn't happen, also don't really mind. The strikeout matchup against the A's is kind of a tricky one where there are guys in this lineup that will strike out. And then there's also Jacob Wilson, rather, Jack's his dad, who does not strike out, period. But outside of that, you do have some strikeout upside here. Overall, the A's active roster, 5th in WRC plus this year. Like, it is not an easy matchup. And only 26th in strikeout percentage. But again, that is pulled down a bit by Jacob Wilson. And then, Steven just mentioned it as well. Good hitting weather here in Sacramento, which you have to keep in mind is doubly good for hitters, bad for pitchers, because this is a minor league stadium. Major league stadiums they're taller, so they naturally block wind better. Obviously, some exceptions like Wrigley, but the minor league parks are just not as tall, so wind is going to have a bigger factor here. You have warm weather, you have the wind blowing out to center. It's a scary spot. That being said, I know for sure factored into our projections, and he still projects as the best pitcher on the slate. So it's a weird spot. Like, if I were to just look at my lineups and say, oh, I have Jack Flaherty everywhere against the White Sox, I would feel better than if I look and say, oh, I have Joe Ryan everywhere against the A's. But Ryan projects better. Strikeout stuff is certainly there for him. And it's not just our projections on him either. Like, I've looked other places and they are higher on Ryan as well. So, yeah, I'm right now at least getting to a lot of Joe Ryan. On the other side, though, I am getting around 2x on Severino too, which is clearly scary given everything I just said about the weather in this park and the fact that it's Luis Severino. But he is only 7K. It's obviously been a theme for me throughout the show that I am paying down a lot at SP2. Like, I'm under the field on Flaherty. I'm under the field on Webb by a massive amount. That's, even though I'm over on Ryan, it's still opening the door for me to just pay down more at SP2. Severino has only struck out 17.5% of hitters so far this year, but the stuff is graded out well. It hasn't factored into his results so far, but a 107.5 stuff plus grade, 104.1 pitching plus grade. Now, the negative here is that he was above average in both of those metrics last year as well, still only struck out 21% of hitters. So I don't think this is necessarily that you should be looking at this and saying like, oh, Severino's actually really good or anything like that. He probably is not that good and is just somebody that those metrics favor for whatever reason. But at 7K on this slate, I'm still fine taking some shots at him. Minnesota, not the easiest matchup. They do certainly have some upside here, but they are 13th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching so far this season on their active roster. They are only 22nd in WRC plus. So I am about 2x the field on Severino, which is scary. I would like to be getting to some Twins here as well. And I am to some extent, not as heavily as I was the Tigers, but getting to 17% Buxton and Correa, 16% Jeffers, about 9% Wallner, 5% apiece on Larnach and France. So a little bit of Twins exposure for me. They are reasonably priced outside of Buxton being 5,900, but you do have obviously a high ceiling on Buxton as well. So far this season, Severino has done a good job limiting power, both in terms of expected power and actual. 138 expected ISO to righties this year, 113 to lefties, 124 actual ISO to lefties, sub 100 to righties. So, that does look good for Severino in addition to the stuff plus and pitching plus grades. It's really just been the lack of strikeouts for him is the only, concern or thing that doesn't make a lot of sense that we've seen so far this season. He has also struggled at home, which is not super surprising. But limited sample, 31 innings pitched on the road, 40 pitched at home, 217 WOBA allowed on the road, 337 at home so far this season, but a 4 flat xFIP at home, 4.2 on the road. Most likely just kind of luck based. He's been luckier on the road. He hasn't been as lucky at home. But you are going to get more kind of bad luck home runs in this park as well. So don't mind the Twins. Don't mind Severino. I am a little above the field on the A's against Ryan, not getting a ton of them, just more than the field. Basically 5% projected ownership to everybody relevant on the A's. I'm getting like 13% Butler. I'm getting 9% apiece on Langoliers, Soderstrom, 7% Rooker. So a little north of the field, but nothing too crazy. I do like the pricing on the A's for the amount of power upside that they do have. They are pretty cheap. $4,200 for Butler, $3,900 for Langoliers, who's one of the better power hitting catchers in baseball. And you don't have Cal Raleigh on this slate. So he's going to be one of the highest upside catching options. Soderstrom with MPE is only $4,100. So far this season, Ryan has given up expected power as well. Just add that to another list of reasons why I'm pretty scared of Joe Ryan here, even though I'm getting to him. 198 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 231 to righties. Massive strikeout splits as well. 38.5% K percentage against righties for Ryan, only 20.5% to lefties. Lawrence Butler, Tyler Soderstrom, I think actually look pretty solid here. Like in lineups where you don't have Joe Ryan, you don't have to full stack the A's, but just throwing in Lawrence Butler, throwing in Tyler Soderstrom is going to be a high upside way to get some negative correlation against Joe Ryan, who is obviously going to have a lot of ownership. Finally, wrapping this one up in another hitter-friendly park, Dodgers facing off with the Mets. Switching New York teams here. We had a pretty fun series between the Dodgers and Yankees. Now we get the Mets in here. Dustin May on the mound for the Dodgers. Paul Blackburn is going for the Mets. I do not have interest in Paul Blackburn. He is only 6,400, which is the price range that I like, but he is coming back from the injured list with a knee injury. He threw 29 and a third minor league innings. Don't know how deep he goes into this game. I assume he's not going to go super deep into it for a combination of it's his first start back from injury and also he's facing the Dodgers. You can see here we have him projected to face 19 batters, go for between 4 and 5 innings. Just not the cheap pitcher that I'm looking to get to. I would rather roll the dice on all the other ones that I mentioned. Dustin May on the other side, 8K salary, 20% projected ownership. I'm getting 11%. You can see that it kind of just seems like I'm being contrarian with my SP2 a pretty good amount of the time or pitching in general. And I've been pretty much hand in hand with the field on a lot of my offenses. That's generally not my approach, but it does make sense, I think, on slates where the best offenses are pretty obvious, or there are several offenses that all look similarly good. And then pitching is kind of just a dice roll. Like there's a bunch of pitchers that aren't great and have very similar range of outcomes. Like Dustin May is one of the more talented pitchers on the slate. He has, good stuff. He throws hard. He's good at keeping the ball on the ground, but he's also facing a Mets team that is tough to strike out. He has a 24.8% strikeout percentage so far this year, which is solid. It's third highest on the slate behind Flaherty and Ryan. Fourth highest behind those guys in Webb. He's less expensive at 8K, but like this Mets offense is obviously a tough one. They rank 8th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They rank 18th in strikeout percentage, and you're in a hitter-friendly park. So I'm fine getting this a May at 8K, but he is getting 20% ownership, and I'm just a bit lower than that right now. As I said, not playing Blackburn. Offensively, I am north of the field on the Mets. I like this against May. Nothing to do with May, just that you are getting 20% projected ownership coming into him. You're getting a good hitter's park. You're getting an offense that has a lot of power upside, has some stolen base upside, and there's just not much ownership. 5 to 10% projected ownership to Soto, to Nimmo, to Alonso, to Lindor, to Beatty. Less of that to the rest of the lineup. I'm getting 27% Juan Soto, 17% Nimmo, 16% Alonso, 14 apiece on Lindor and Francisco Alvarez at 2,900 if he's in the lineup, and then not getting much of McNeil, Taylor, or Beatty. Obviously, that could change between now and lock, but May is generally good at limiting power. 143 expected ISO with a 28% K percentage to lefties this year. Righties have been a bit of an issue, though. Only a 20% strikeout percentage, 226 expected ISO. Pete Alonso would be the guy that you're really looking to take advantage of that from this Mets lineup. And like I said, I am about 2x the field on him. So I do like the Mets as a spot you can get contrarian. You're not sacrificing any upside. You're sacrificing a little bit in the way of median projection because clearly the matchup against any number of other pitchers on this slate is better than the matchup against Dustin May. But, the way I think about it that I've mentioned on shows before is, when you're talking about tournaments, not necessarily like obviously how often a team succeeds is important and you do want to consider that, but it's also what does it look like when they have a good game? And when the Mets have a good game, when the Mets score 8 to 10 runs in Dodger Stadium, it looks like a lot of home runs. Whereas you talk about a team like the Padres in San Francisco, yeah, the Padres are clearly capable of having a good game, scoring 8 to 10 runs. But the problem is, even if they do that, of the percentage of the time the Padres score 8 to 10 runs, a high percentage of those games is singles, doubles, blue hits falling in, just like station to station baseball that is not accumulating enough fantasy points that you're really excited to have it. Whereas when the Mets have the 8 to 10 to 12 run game in Dodger Stadium, which is one of the best places to hit home runs, and you have an offense that has a bunch of dudes that hit home runs and steal bases, it's a lot of fantasy points. So that is, kind of the argument in favor of the Mets. And you can make it for, a team like the A's as well in that stadium. You can make it for the Twins in that stadium. Dodgers on the other side here, I am more in line with the field. Shohei Ohtani, clearly the priority for the field, the priority for me. 26% of the field's lineups, 43% of my lineups at 6,500. Max Muncy getting 12% ownership. I have 16%. Everything else drops off for me after that. Mookie, 13% projected ownership. I'm getting 7%. May or may not be back today with his fractured toe. I think he's expected back today or tomorrow. So we'll see. Conforto has been dog shit this year, but he's only 3,100, 5% owned. I'm getting 6%. So I'm not really getting much of the Dodgers overall, but I am getting a ton of Ohtani. He's my highest owned hitter on the slate. I'm getting a good amount of Muncy, and goes without saying that if I get more Dodgers later on, that would be fine. But the problem you run into is just that when you combine Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Smith or something like that, they become pretty expensive. And the value pieces aren't that good. But clearly, if you get to some Dodgers, I wouldn't have any issue with that. But I do have more Mets overall than Dodgers. I have more Ohtani than anyone, though. So to quickly recap, starting with the pitchers that I'm getting to the most right now. Again, playing pretty contrarian at the moment at pitcher. Joe Ryan, Jonathan Cannon, Luis Severino are my three highest owned pitchers. Clearly, I would like that to be like it. Just from a confidence standpoint, the best three pitchers on the slate are Ryan, Flaherty, and Webb. But like I said, playing pretty contrarian, at least right now at pitcher, subject to change. Looking at bats, though, where I have been more in line with the field for the most part. And starting at catcher, William Contreras, Ryan Jeffers, Francisco Alvarez, my three highest owned there. At first base, Shohei Ohtani, Spencer Torkelson, Pete Alonso. I really like Torkelson and Alonso a lot. In parks, in Torkelson's case, an average park for hitting home runs, but much better than his home park. But both pitchers, Jonathan Cannon and Dustin May, have given up more power to same-handed hitters with lower strikeout percentages this year. I really like Torkelson and Alonso. Second base, getting to Colt Keith as a value play, Bryce Turang, Christian Campbell. Third base, Miguel Vargas as a value option, Max Muncy, Rafael Devers. Again, another reverse splits pitcher there. Tyler Anderson for the Angels, much better against righties than he is against lefties. Shortstop, getting to Trevor Story as a value option, Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor. And then in the outfield, getting to Kerry Carpenter, Juan Soto, Riley Green, more Shohei Ohtani, Byron Buxton, paying up getting to just high upside outfielders, taking advantage of paying down at some of those infield positions. From a stacking standpoint right now, as far as all stack types go, getting to the Tigers, the Mets, the Brewers, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers, which is driven heavily by Shohei Ohtani. 5-mans, Detroit, Milwaukee, Boston are my top 5. 4-mans, Detroit, Boston, Milwaukee, my top 3. Detroit, Milwaukee, Boston, rather, my top 3 for 5-mans as well. So that's all I have for you on this one. One other thing, actually, just because it's come up on Twitter lately, I got first the other day with a 3-3 stack. I got first a couple weeks ago with, I think, a 3-2. Just quickly looking at the stack types that I have, because I do tend to play a little bit more 3-mans when slates get smaller and when contest sizes get larger, which we have both of those here. So 15% of my lineups are 5-2 right now, 15% are 4-3, 13% 4-2, 13% 5x, 10% 3-2-2, another 5% 3x2, another 5% 3x3. So right now about 25 to 30% of my lineups are less than 4-man stacks. Some combination of, 3, whatever. So that is a function of there being fewer games on the slate and the slate, the tournament size being larger. The bigger the field is, obviously, the closer you have to be to like the actual nuts. Not that you ever need the actual nuts, but you need all the a vast majority of the guys that have big games. And stacking doesn't necessarily increase your ceiling; it increases your floor. So this is a function, and it's another way you can differentiate as well. That's something that I think doesn't get talked about, is like, if you have a slate where you're having trouble finding a stack that you want to get to and pitching you want to get to that isn't popular, you can combat that somewhat by, instead of playing a 5-man stack, play a 3-man from one team, a 3-man from another team. And you get the situation where if you get the 3 guys, that do really well, but then you beat out like the guys that do kind of good, you can, you're jumping those 5-man stacks from those teams. So it is a way to differentiate also. Choke Oldham said, would you do that for 20 max, 15K entries? Probably, yeah. I play that very similarly to how I play the 150 max large field, if not identically. So yeah, wanted to point that out too. This is a slate where I would expect to have a higher percentage of lineups than normal that have the smaller stack sizes. So that's all for this one. Thank you for checking out the show. Don't forget the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and you can get access to our projections using the link in the description below. Use promo code UDAMLB to get 10% off of that. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Thanks again for checking out the show.